but welcome to Energy and Me. This is part of our Eco Week lineup of events. So clue is in the name, we'll be exploring a little bit about energy. So we'll have today, we have Una Halpin from the SEAI, and we're going to look at from our homes to the planet, energy is everywhere. So in this session, we're going to discover what energy is, how it affects our lives, and how we can change the way we create and use energy to make our world a better place. So a little bit about SDG 17, 7, not 17. There are 17 goals though. So throughout the week, all of our workshops are linked in to the different SDGs. And we explore the workshops through the kind of the lens of sustainable development goals. So these are 17 shared objectives that address major global challenges like poverty, climate change, inequality, and they provide a universal blueprint for helping people and the planet thrive together. So why does this matter? It looks at access for all, ensures everyone has reliable energy and electricity. Environmental impact ensures everyone has the same. And then supporting development, powers schools, hospitals, businesses, and homes to improve quality of life. So essentially, clean and accessible energy is vital for modern life and helps communities thrive while also keeping the environment safe. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Una, and she's going to take you through a bit about her work and a bit about the topic of energy. So if you want to take the reins, Una, and you can fire away. And welcome to Athlone Community College with 11 sixth-year geography students that are the Green School ambassadors in our school. Welcome, guys.
Okay, just check. Can you see that there now?
I can.
Yeah, lovely. Okay, so welcome everyone. Lovely to have you here. And I suppose we're just a brief enough introduction to what we do here in SEAI and some of the resources that we have. So I suppose, first of all, before I introduce SEAI and myself, what we're about, just an overview of what we're going to cover today. So what is sustainable energy, the link with climate change, a little bit on energy use in Ireland, the non-renewable and renewable energy forms, and then kind of a little bit on what can we do. So I suppose we'll start with, well, what is energy? So energy is the ability to do work. So anything that moves or works in any way needs energy. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, but can only be converted from one form to another. So we have energy on Earth comes from the sun. But we use lots of different forms of energy, which you'll have known from your kind of your junior cycle and all that. Like we'll have our different forms of energy. We have light, heat, we have chemical, electrical, potential, kinetic. So all of these kind of forms of energy, if we want to use energy, we have to kind of find for the energy and convert it from one form to another to make it a useful energy for ourselves. Now, so all the energy starts with the sun, which is a very simple explanation of this. So energy is taken in by the tree here during photosynthesis. The tree then uses that light energy from the sun is converted into chemical energy. That chemical energy then is used by the tree to grow and to produce berries. The berries then are a source of food for the bird. So the bird comes and eats the food. Food is the fuel for that bird, and that's still a source of chemical energy. And then that bird can convert the energy and use it to fly away, which is kinetic energy. Now, that's a very simple explanation of it. What do we mean by sustainable energy then? So energy is, if we want to be able to continue to use energy, we need to think about a couple of things: where our energy comes from, how we use it and how well we can use it, and how we can kind of reduce the amount of energy that we use. So from SEAI, our mission is to be at the heart of delivering Ireland's energy revolution. We drive the reduction and replacement of fossil fuel usage. We're a knowledge-led organisation. We partner with citizens, communities, businesses and governments, and we are trusted collaborators, innovators, funders and educators. So the role of SEAI is to kind of ensure that Ireland's energy will be sustainable in the future. And we do that in a number of ways. So kind of partnering with, as we said, communities, businesses. Part of that is through grants, so that we can kind of, if you're getting some work done to reduce energy in your home or other buildings, then you can get some of that money back in the form of a grant from SEAI. Also, kind of a big part will be gathering all the information. So if we want to change the way we're getting our energy and the way we're using energy, we need to have the data on what we're currently doing. So a big part of SEAI would be gathering that data and knowing, where's the energy coming from? What is our energy mix? What are the greenhouse gases from particular energy uses? And kind of monitoring how that changes from time to time as well. So I suppose sustainable energy, it improves people's lives. So if energy is sustainable, you can rely on it. It brings comfort and convenience. It addresses environmental challenges. And it's also beneficial to the economy because at the moment, we're relying on kind of importing a lot of our energy, and that kind of, it's not very stable. It's also, there's a huge drain on the economy there. So if we can generate more of our own sustainable energy, then we can kind of benefit not just the environment, but people and our economy at the same time. So just kind of three main ways that we think about, sustainable energy. So first of all, we have to think about where does the energy come from in the first place. So at the moment, a good proportion of our energy is coming from fossil fuels. So we need to replace the fossil fuels with more renewable forms of energy. So that's looking at the source of the energy. The second thing is efficiency. So we want to get the most out of the energy that we have. So that comes into the appliances that we use. So looking at more efficient technologies in our appliances and our lights and all these things. So if you look at, say, energy ratings on appliances, you'll see something that has an A rating will do the same job with less energy. So you're actually reducing the amount of energy we use through technology. The other thing, efficiency, comes into houses as well. So if you can have a house that's well insulated, that's an A or B rated house, that means it's going to cost a lot less money to keep that house heated, and you're burning a lot less fossil fuel in the process. And the third thing then is the behavior change. And I suppose this is the one that we can all have an impact on. It doesn't cost anything. And in fact, you're actually, in most cases, if you're changing your behavior and using less energy, you're saving money. So it doesn't cost anything to do this. And we do this in a number of ways. So if we look at the electricity that we use, we look at our transport. So our, cars, trains, planes, boats, everything. We look at the stuff that we use and how we can kind of reduce, reuse, recycle to save energy. The heating in our homes, by just simply turning down the thermostat, can save energy. By looking after our natural environment, so making sure that we have, we're planting forests, we're looking after our bogs, all of this that can help to kind of take in some of that carbon dioxide from the air. Looking at our food, where does our food come from, the packaging, the transport, all of that as well, and our water use as well. So because it takes energy to pump water into our houses and heat it and all that as well, and treat it, which you'll be hearing more about later. So what is climate change then? So we have, when we talk about climate change, there's a lot of kind of jargon that goes out, a lot of words, and sometimes they're kind of related, but they're, sometimes people get kind of mixed up with what do we actually mean by these various things. So maybe as I'm kind of putting up these things, you might kind of have a think to yourself, well, what do we actually mean by greenhouse gases? So maybe just turn to the person beside you and kind of think, well, what do you think greenhouse gases are? What do we understand about these terms? The next one then, carbon emissions. So we often talk about carbon emissions. What does that actually mean? The greenhouse effect. Global warming, and I'm just putting in brackets this 1.5 degrees. Often people talk about, we need to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. What do we actually mean by that figure? And climate change. So I'm just going to give you another minute, just kind of think about what those words mean to you. They're ones that you've probably heard over and over again, but sometimes when we're hearing all these things, we just kind of oh yeah, I know what that is. And when you actually start thinking, do I know the difference between the greenhouse effect and global warming, or what is this? Okay, so greenhouse gases. So the main greenhouse gas, the one we hear most about, is carbon dioxide, CO2. We also have methane, CH4, which is one, produced in smaller amounts, but is a more powerful greenhouse gas. And then we have nitrous oxide, and water vapor is also a greenhouse gas, and we have some others as well. When we talk about carbon emissions, I'm going to kind of show you a slide that kind of puts this into context in a minute. But carbon emissions are, the greenhouse gases that we are responsible for producing. So, and when we talk about carbon emissions, we don't just talk about carbon dioxide. We kind of talk about methane, nitrous oxide, and other greenhouse gases in that as well. So they're all kind of lumped together. Yeah. The greenhouse effect then. So the greenhouse, if you look at the picture on the screen here, the Earth essentially is acting like, or the Earth's atmosphere is acting like a little greenhouse. So if you walk into a greenhouse on a sunny day, so my greenhouse this morning was 35 degrees because it was shut overnight. So what it's actually doing is that the sun's energy is coming through the glass, and that's some of that is heat energy, some of that is light energy. The light energy is being converted to heat energy inside, and then the glass traps that energy and holds it inside the greenhouse. Now, the same thing happens on the Earth. If we didn't have greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, or the greenhouse effect as such, then we wouldn't actually be able to live on our planet. So we need a certain amount of these greenhouse gases to hold enough energy, heat energy around the Earth to be able to kind of avoid the real extremes and to allow us to live on our planet. The problem is when we artificially enhance the greenhouse effect. So with the greenhouse effect, there's enough greenhouse gases in the atmosphere from normal kind of human life and animal life on the planet. So when we burn fossil fuels, we add extra carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. We also have extra methane from, say, agricultural activities, nitrous oxide from use of artificial fertilizers. All of these are kind of greenhouse gases that added, they're kind of man-made greenhouse gases that add to this greenhouse effect and increase it. And that's what we call global warming. Now, the magic number of 1.5 degrees, and we have to limit warming to 1.5 degrees. So what's that actually mean? What we're doing is we're measuring from a baseline. So you might think there's huge, extremes of temperature on the Earth. Some countries are hotter, some countries are colder, different seasonal changes and all that. But it actually, if you average all of that out, so average out all the countries in the world and all throughout the year, then generally there should be very little change from the average global temperature from year to year. So 1.5 degrees doesn't seem a whole lot, but actually what that's telling us is that we are, if we go above this 1.5 degrees, above pre-industrial levels. So when we really started burning fossil fuels during the Industrial Revolution. So what we did is take the average global temperature from before the Industrial Revolution and compare it to the average global temperature now. And we're pretty close to that 1.5 degrees of warming. So this is what, and beyond that scale, there's going to be a lot of changes that are very hard to reverse. So when we talk about global warming then, global warming is the average increase in the temperature of the Earth. And climate change is the effect of global warming. So when we increase the heat in the atmosphere, that also increases heat in the oceans because the oceans are absorbing a lot of that heat. Then we change the way the winds move and we change the ocean currents. And that can affect our climate in lots of different ways. So global warming doesn't just mean every place is getting warmer. It can mean extremes. So it can mean extremes of heat or cold. So you can have, extreme cold weather events as a result of climate change. You can have too much rainfall in one place at one time, or too little rainfall causing droughts, or what often you get a huge amount kind of increase in storm activity and the frequency and the intensity of storms. So just when I'm kind of and some of the consequences of climate change. So these are things, sometimes we tend to think of the consequences of climate change as things that happen in other countries. So people, oh yeah, the ice caps are melting and all that. But we are actually seeing, and Ireland, we're not seeing the same consequences as other countries, but we are still seeing the consequences of climate change. And increasingly in recent years, as we go on, we're seeing more and more of these changes. So some of the consequences, flooding. So this is a combination of climate, extreme rainfall events, and also kind of poor land management and building and floodplains and all this as well. We have had, not particularly Ireland isn't particularly associated with hot temperatures, but we have had heat waves. So if it's, you know, beyond what we're normally expected, then that has huge implications for wildlife, but also for, you know, crops and all that. And as an agricultural nation, that's a big deal. As I said, climate change can also lead to increased snow, increased cold, snow and ice events. Wind, you know, houses being damaged, property, has impacts for biodiversity, like migration of species, even something simple as butterflies. Last year was a horrendous year for butterflies all across Ireland and the UK, whereas this year then we had a much warmer spring and all that. We've had an increase in the butterflies. So some species are particularly susceptible to short-term weather changes, but then long-term climate changes as well. And agriculture, you know, droughts and floods and all that can have a strong impact on our ability to grow crops. So in Ireland, what do we use energy for? So I'm just going to so a little bit here, just on short video clip, and all of these are available on the SEAI website. So if you go to seai.ie/schools, you'll find a lot of this information, or just scroll down on the homepage and find the schools tab. Sorry.
Are you ready for another doom and gloom video about climate change? Sorry to disappoint, this is not it. There's a lot being done to tackle climate change, and loads more that you and I can do. We can start by talking to the people who can make a difference. Remind them of the big climate statistics that we already know. Like, nearly half of all Irish energy comes from oil, and that we import 80% of the energy we use. Ireland can put more work and effort in clean energy generation, can't we? Because climate change affects us all. We can do better.
So just kind of two statistics there, like that 80% of our energy in Ireland comes from oil. And you know, we're importing a significant amount of our energy as well. So being aware of these statistics, sometimes we kind of talk of energy and saving energy and all in abstract terms, but on the SEAI website, there's actually a section called Data and Insights that goes through all of these statistics and all that. So you can actually find out, well, how much energy we're using, where is it coming from, and all of that as well. And every year SEAI produces the Energy in Ireland report. So that kind of gives all those kind of statistics and all in one document. So fossil fuels, first of all, are gas, used for heating our homes in a fair amount of cases. It's used for cooking. And the biggest use of gas in Ireland is in electricity generation. So gas is burned in our power stations. So about 50% of our electricity is generated from burning gas in power stations. We have oil. We have, in recent years, we've been reducing our dependence on oil for electricity generation. It's used in small scale, maybe for, you know, if you have an oil-fired range or something, it might be used for cooking. It's used a fair bit for heating our homes. So a lot of people would have oil-fired heating. Oil and gas would be the two main ones. But the main use of oil in Ireland is actually in our transport. So we're, you know, we could even say, oh yeah, we're not using much for electricity and all that. That there's a big part, 90% of our transport is powered by oil or oil products like petrol and diesel. And then we have our other two fossil fuels, the coal and the peat or turf. So these are so oil and gas made from the remains of fossil animals. Our geography students there in Athlone will hopefully know the formation of limestone rock. So we have the shells and corals and all these invertebrates, marine invertebrates, fall to the bottom of the sea. They get crushed together and form limestone rock. But inside the shells are the body bits. So the bodies of those creatures, then they decompose and they actually become over time, they become the oil. And then the gas is released as those creatures are rotting. They're releasing this gas, and that's the gas that becomes the gas that we use. So and they're stored down in the rocks, usually at the bottom of the sea. The other two then, the peat, formed in bogs, kind of started to form in Ireland about the end of the last ice age, about 10,000 years ago. And it's formed from kind of the partially decomposed remains of plants in water. And then, but we also had 300 million years ago, we had peat formation as at the time when Ireland was kind of close to the equator and it was kind of almost like a large rainforest. We had peat formation at that stage as trees and plants fell down into water, and then they got compressed and heated inside the earth until they turned into coal. So again, about 300 million years ago. So what do we use these for? Mostly in Ireland, coal and turf would be burned in open fires or kind of stoves for heating. Occasionally, they would be the main source of heating for the house if they're burned in a range or a kind of a stove. Again, if you have a range that you might use for cooking, small scale, they're being phased out for electricity generation. But there's still, a fair few of these being burned. And the important thing is fossil fuels are non-renewable. So once we've used what we have, they can't be replaced. So what are our biggest greenhouse gas emitters? I just want to say as well, if anyone has any questions, do type them into the chat as you go along and we can come back to them at the end.
Real climate change champions care about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But who and what are our biggest emitters? First up is farming and agriculture. With nearly 7 million cows and 6 million sheep, all those birds add up to a lot of greenhouse gas. In second place is transport. Over 95% of the energy that powers our cars, buses and trains still comes from oil, and that gives off a lot of CO2. And finally, dirty electricity generation is number 3. We still use a lot of gas, coal and oil to generate Ireland's electricity, and all that fossil fuel creates even more CO2. In our homes and schools, only about 40% of the electricity we use is renewable. Let's have a clean fight for a clean future.
Okay, so just to kind of explain the emissions here, I'm going to introduce you to something called the global warming potential, or sometimes called CO2 equivalent. So when we burn fossil fuels, we create carbon dioxide gas. Now, carbon dioxide gas is given a global warming potential number of 1. So it's just a relative number. So carbon dioxide has a global warming potential of 1. The methane then, which is the main source of methane, would be agriculture. So this kind of explains why agriculture is our biggest emitters, where it's not, we don't use a huge amount of energy in agriculture, but it is the biggest source of emissions on the island. Because methane has a global warming potential of 25. So this means that 1 kilogram of methane that's released has the same effect for global warming as 25 kilograms of carbon dioxide. And the third one then is nitrous oxide. And nitrous oxide has a global warming potential of 298. So again, it's released in small amounts, but it's a very powerful greenhouse gas. So just to kind of put that into context, what it actually looks like. So 1 kilogram of carbon dioxide versus 1 kilogram of methane. So this is the kind of showing you kind of the global warming potential of methane. And then would be 1 kilogram of nitrous oxide, which is the equivalent of 298 kilograms of carbon dioxide. So this is why sometimes when we look at graphs of, or pie charts, whatever, of energy use versus greenhouse gases, there isn't a direct correlation, and that's because it depends on the type of gases released. Now we have, just keeping an eye on time here. So we have, in Ireland, we have a number of targets that we want to reach. Now, if we look at the top 3 from the last video, agriculture was the top 1, followed by transport and electricity. Now, we're going to be looking at what are our targets then? So we have these internationally binding targets that we have to reach. So we have to kind of look at how are we going to reach these targets? How are we going to reduce our emissions as quickly as possible?
Let's speed things up a little. By 2030, Ireland and all EU countries has a target to reduce its carbon emission by 51%. We need to see 75% less emissions from electricity, 50% less from transport, and 25% less from agriculture. It's coming in 2030, and it's the law. We've started cutting down emissions slowly, but now it's time to accelerate. Ask the people in power to keep their word and drive our sustainable future today.
Okay, so if we look at the targets, they don't quite match the we were saying that the biggest emitter was agriculture, followed by transport, but the big one we're trying to target most is electricity. And the reason that is because it's easier to make a quick change with electricity generation. So we are, if we compare our electricity generation in Ireland, like say even 10, 20 years ago to what it is now, we now have a lot more renewables on the system. So between wind is our biggest. So almost 40% of our electricity at the moment is coming from wind, whereas, that's been a really big increase, and we can increase that further with the use of offshore wind. Solar is quite a small area at the moment, it's only about 5%, but that can grow quickly as well. So we're kind of putting a lot of effort into that. So electricity is the one where it's easiest to make the big impact fast. The others, say transport, we're 90% fossil fuels. We really have to be kind of thinking about, well, what's the alternative to the oil and gas? Now we have, electricity is kind of coming on board, but that kind of takes time to build up electric fleet network. And the other thing is as well, if we start changing over our transport all to electric, then we need to generate a lot more electricity as well. So we're kind of start with the ones that are easiest to make the quick changes with, and then we also need to kind of build on that with all the other sectors too. Now, one thing that a lot of people say when it comes to climate change, you'll hear a lot like, well, we're only a small country. What difference can we make? We need to be looking at the big countries and all that. But if you look at the way we measure, emissions per capita, means, the emissions per person living in our country. So we're a small country, but each person in that country is making a big impact when it, a negative impact in a lot of ways, the emissions that we're generating. So this just last video here is a little bit about that.
Real change starts small. When it comes to climate change, even small acts can make a big difference. When all of us take climate action seriously, the world can change. Even people like you and me, our families and friends, our neighbours, and everyone in our communities, when we come together, we can do something really impactful. Like when Ireland led the way by being the first country to ban plastic bags, or stop new licenses for oil and gas companies to explore in Irish waters. Today, half of the world's greenhouse gas emissions come from small countries. If we keep our promises in Ireland, our small country can inspire bigger changes across the globe.
So 50% of the emissions are coming from small countries. Like there's a lot of small countries, a lot more small countries than bigger countries. So if we were all to say, well, sure, we're a small country, it doesn't count, then that would be a big difference as well. So everything that we can do, as a country, but also kind of on smaller scale as well, can make an overall difference. So I suppose any comments or anything, questions in the chat there so far, Maya?
Not so far. Oh, geez, that was a little hoarse there. Not so far, but if anyone does have questions, pop them in.
Okay, so I'm just going to touch on a few things. I suppose a big thing, I was talking about SEAI, and one of the big things that we do is collect all the data on energy use. And this is something that I would say, apply to yourselves as well, especially, say for a Green Schools Committee or something, you're looking to make a difference. Then rather than kind of just saying, oh, well, how are we going to save energy? Think about, well, can we measure how much energy we're actually using now? And then can we measure the impact? So this will you actually start to see results when you can actually measure the impact. So these are a few different ideas I'm going to throw out here. I'm not going to go into too much detail on any of these. I'm just kind of introduce the ideas to you. And this is kind of different things that we can look at if we're going to look at our energy use. So one of the big things in schools that you can make a difference on, and again, the quickest impact is from electricity. So if you look at the overall emissions from your school, the highest emissions are probably going to be from heating the school, but it's harder to make a difference there. We can do it, of course, but electricity, you know, it's smaller, but it's an easier win. You can make big changes, big savings with electricity fairly simply. So I'm just going to show you one example of how you could measure that electricity use. Okay, sorry. So this is just an example of one of the graphs that you find on the SEAI website, and this is just showing the CO2 emissions from electricity generation. So I was saying that a lot more. We're now almost at 40% of our electricity from renewable sources. So you can see if you look at the emissions from electricity generation. So what it's measuring is the grams of carbon dioxide per kilowatt hour. So kilowatt hour is kind of, it's I suppose the energy, the unit that they use for kind of electricity generation. So when we talk about in science, you'll hear the unit of electricity is the unit of energy is the joule. Kilowatt hour is just kind of for measuring bigger units of electricity. So we can see that back in 2004, say, or 2005, we were kind of about 650 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour of electricity generated, whereas in 2021, that had gone right down. So and that has gone down again since. So the electricity the emissions from electricity generation have gone down, and that's on a kind of a country level. So just figures here from 1990, it was 896 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour, and in 2022 that was 332, and that figure has gone down again since. Now, the other thing we look at, so that's something that's maybe kind of not under our direct control, that's the generation of electricity. Another thing we look at is the efficiency of lights and appliances. So we have gone from the old incandescent bulb to the CFL bulbs and then to the LED bulbs. So each of those bulbs is giving the same amount of light. So the lumens, so the amount of light coming out of them is similar, but the actual energy used to create that light has actually gone way down. So the old 100-watt incandescent bulb was given similar amount of light to a modern 12-watt LED bulb. So the efficiency of appliances have improved. And so things like when we replace bulbs and that, if we replace them with a more efficient bulb, then we're actually going to save energy as well. But the biggest change that we can make ourselves, and the biggest impact you could have in school, would be the behavior change. So how could we reduce our use of lighting at home or in the classroom? So we can start by looking and say, well, you know, how much light do we use? When do we not leave the light? So if we use the lights only when needed, so if we turn them off every time we leave the room, when there's nobody in a classroom, the lights should be off. Now, some classrooms, you may have sensors on the bulbs and all that, so that helps. That's a kind of a something that helps you to do this, so you don't need as much of the behavior change. Making use of natural daylight. So simply things like opening up blinds fully and making use of natural daylight means you can reduce the amount of time the lights are on. You might think about lighting design. So this is a bigger kind of something that might need a bit of money, cash input and all that, would be lighting design or even the room design. So looking at where is the most light in the classroom and how can we make the most use of that. Something else that's nice to be aware of is how much light do we actually need in classrooms. So the recommended level for classroom lighting is 300 lux. Now lux, I mentioned lumens earlier. Lumens is the amount of light coming out of a light bulb. Lux is a measure of the amount of light falling on a surface. So we need a figure of 300 lux, or minimum of 300 lux, to be able to work properly in a classroom and avoid things like eye strain. Now, how can you measure that? You can measure that with a simple free app on a phone or a tablet. There are a number of these, just light meter. So any one of these, and that'll actually give you a reading straight away. You just hold it up, put it on the surface on the desk and see how much light is falling on that. So this is something that you might do as a kind of a simple classroom investigation and just see what are the light levels in different parts of the room and measure maybe different times of day and different times of the year and just see. So we could actually measure our use of light and use that to kind of maybe think, well, in case of you might need, generally the side of the classroom that's beside the windows is going to be brighter than the inside of the classroom. So it might be that you need some of the lights in the classroom on, but not all of them. Now, to calculate it, we have a simple energy equals power by time. So energy measured in kilowatt hours is power, the kilowatts, by the time. So say the example of light bulbs. If you look and we see we have 10 light bulbs in the classroom and they're each 60 watts. So then we have 600 watts is our power, or 0.6 kilowatts. And then we multiply it by the time. So that's the amount of time that the lights are left on. So that would take a bit of monitoring a room from time to time and then checking, without changing any behavior, just checking how long are the lights on? When you walk into a room, were they left on? Who was in the classroom last? So kind of a combination of looking at timetables and seeing, first thing in the morning, are the lights on? Were they left on overnight?
Oh, just a heads up, Una, that we're coming up to 10 minutes past. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just do a couple more and then we'll finish up then. Yep. So that's just one thing. Transport, you can look at, again, all of the data is available freely online. You can look at, how much of our transport, our emissions come from transport. This is, how much of it is coming from. 40% of our transport is from private cars. So if you can look at journeys to school and look at how people get to school, then a campaign there to measure, the kind of, again, you measure the emissions from a car. There's a carbon intensity of new cars here. You can compare that to the distances traveled and work out, what are the emissions from people coming to school. And then you can have a campaign and see if we can reduce that. Also, when we're looking at travel, things like, size of car, distance traveled, number of passengers, speed of car, engine idling. These are all things that kind of relate to our transport related emissions. But also transport thinks of, so you make a journey in a car. How far do you travel? Use the table I just referenced there. Get the CO2 emissions and think then how can you reduce your impact? So walking or cycling, carpooling, public transport. And transport also relates to our stuff. So online shopping, big transport, fast fashion, travel on holidays, food miles, all of these things relate to our transport emissions. And I won't go into this because we want to, so think about it. So all of these things, so electricity use, our transport, our food, our heating, our waste, and our water all relate to our use of energy and our production of greenhouse gas emissions. So to find out more, as I said, I've only done a quick overview there. We do provide workshops. So we have a team of facilitators who come out and deliver workshops in schools. We also do some online teacher CPD as well. And you'll find all the details on seai.ie/schools, or just scroll down to the middle of the homepage and you'll find the schools tab. And not just the schools information, all of the information on home energy, all of the data that anything to do with energy in Ireland. We have, fact sheets for energy and education, how we can kind of reduce energy and all that as well. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing there.
That's great. And just before maybe some of the schools think of some questions, I'm just going to invite Niloufar, who's a researcher, to just briefly share. She's going to share a little bit of an insight into some of her research. If you want to do that there. And then while she's talking, maybe if you guys think of some questions you might want to ask before we wrap up.
Hi, everyone. Thank you from the owner to sharing great information regarding the energy. I just wanted to share my screen. So do you have my slides now?
Yep, I can see them.
So my name is Niloufar Najafi. I'm a second-year PhD student working in University of Galway, and also my part of research regarding the Nexus team and project. So today I want to talk about the relationship between the energy and wastewater. Have you ever thought about can turning a tap also using the electricity? So the answer is yes. Water needs energy. For example, when we move water with pipes and pumps, we use energy. When we take shower and do dishes, heating water takes energy. And more importantly, when we want to clean dirty water called wastewater, we need energy. Today, I specifically want to talk about wastewater treatment plants and the link between these process and energy. So, first of all, what is exactly wastewater? In our in our home and school, when we wash our hands, wash toilets, take showers, do dishes or laundries, we generating the wastewater. At the same time, in the larger scale, for example, in city, in part of the factories, industries, and restaurant and so on, they are also generating wastewater. These wastewater are collecting with pipes and pumps and then go through the wastewater treatment plants. But before they are releasing this water to our environment for protecting the environment, we should clean and treating these part of our wastewater and clean before to releasing in the environment. So there's very important to having clean water to protect our environment, especially for the lakes, for the river, for the ocean and aquatic ecosystem in there. And also it's very important to our health. But there's a big problem in this process. Having clean water needs lots of energy. As an example, in Ireland, based on the data, in each year, there is a huge amount of wastewater, such as 460 million cubic meter treated per year. And also, it's approximately needs 230 gigawatt hour per year to use for treating these wastewater. So to help you to imagine this, the energy used to treat water and having clean water is at the same as the 2,600,000 LED lamps turn on all day every year. So this massive energy can impact the environment. As a result, the scientists like me are nowadays working on the solution and innovative method that how can we reduce the amount of energy. My research is specifically is about the relationship between energy and wastewater treatment plant. For now, we have a stricter standards in wastewater treatment plant that can meet the environmental goals and also protect our environment for having clean water. But at the same time, for future, we need to find the right balance between the energy and having clean water in wastewater treatment plant. So balancing between having clean water and energy is very important to protect our environment, especially for the future. So always remember that how water and energy work together. And saving the water and energy is very important to protect our environment. Also, you can help us in this process. For example, when turn off the tap while wash your hands or brushing your teeth, or take short showers. So it can save both energy and water. Thank you for joining this session and listen to me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to you both. I learned so much from both those presentations there. Energy isn't something that I'd be, I suppose, as confident on as one of the topics. So that's just super useful, and you've both broken things down in a really accessible manner. before we finish up, does anyone in the call have any questions?
There's a question coming in there. I think someone's typing there.
Oh yeah. So hi Una, we're just wondering what the name of the light meter app you use is.
Okay, so the one I use is just called mine is an Android phone, and I think it's just called Light Meter. So if you just go onto your app store, whether it's Android or iPhone, and just type in Light Meter, you'll actually have a choice of different ones. And they're all free, like, so you can get them free to download and try one out. If you don't if that one doesn't work out, you try a different one, because I know the one I have, I think it's just called Light Meter, and the symbol is just it's LUX, I think it's Lux is the symbol on it. I like it. It's a nice simple display. Some of them are a bit more detailed, so like you kind of, if you don't get the right one first, try another one and see. And it won't be entirely accurate. It's using your phone's camera, but it's a pretty good one. You can do lots of different kind of simple investigations in the classroom and just look at light levels that way.
That's a good question. I will have to have a look into that myself.
I use it for lots of things.
No, it sounds really cool. There's an app for everything.
If you're doing ecology as well, because if you're studying light levels outside, you can use your light meter app for that too.
Cool. Okay, that's really good to know. Do we have any other questions? See more typing, so I'll give people a second. Okay, what I'll do, just as, one student has a question also. Does dimming an LED light affect the energy consumption of a household?
Yeah, so if you dim the lights, like they're going to be using, you're kind of reducing the amount of light, then you're also reducing the energy. So like lighting in terms of overall energy use is quite low, but if you think, the energy used for a single bulb is quite low, so dimming one LED light is not going to make a huge difference overall. But if you do think that, that every light in the room, we use them quite a lot as well, so it's something that, the things aren't going to be massive, but they are, they do add up. Like if you're thinking about all the lights in a house and that as well, so kind of it will all add up.
Okay, that's good to know. What I might do there is if you have any questions, feel free to come into the chat, but I'm just going to wrap up the session with a little bit of, I suppose, extra info for you. So if today got your brain going, you've got some ideas, maybe you're a little inspired, there's a few different ways that you can get involved in other things as well if you wish to. So we have a program called the Young Environmentalist Awards, which is an all-island eco-action program that rewards young people between the ages of 10 to 18 that take environmental action of all kinds. It can really be anything. That's a great project to have a look at if you aren't really too sure what you want to do, but you want to take action. There's loads of ideas and resources on our website around that. Another thing is we do workshops. So we do workshops across the island on loads of different topics. So it could be waste, fast fashion, marine life. There's loads going on. And then if you're interested in trying to find like-minded people, we have a couple of different programs for after school that might be of interest. One is the Youth for Climate Justice, which delves a bit deeper into climate justice, and then sustainable development as well. And then just a request, and this will be emailed to you as well, but if you have the chance to provide feedback, we really, really welcome it. We run Eco Week every year, and every year we try to make it better. So if you have any thoughts or ideas or things that you wanted to learn about that we might not have covered, let us know, and we'll really, really appreciate that. And then lastly, so we're, I suppose, halfway through Eco Week now, and we have a few other workshops coming up over the next 2 days. So tomorrow there's Hidden Heroes of Our Fresh Water and Food, Future and the Planet. And then on Friday, Nature for a Happy Mind and What If Waste Could Be Useful. And lastly, thank you so much. Thank you to our attendees who were so good and well behaved and had some really good questions there. Thank you. And thank you so much to our speakers as well. You were really informative. And hopefully you've given the guys some food for thought. And if there's any questions after this, feel free to get in touch with us. We're always happy to help. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.